This is not really story time, but my friend Hope pointed out this kid's book to me called When You Take a Step. I am in love with this book. So it's When You Take a Step. One of the things I really like about this book is a lot of kids' books today feel like they're written for adults with pictures, and it's not really thinking about the kid. So this starts with what happens when you take a step. You begin a journey. You find your balance. You greet the world wide and full. You make new friends, wild and free. You share a path. You join the rhythm. You blaze a trail. You follow your heart. You begin to dream big and bold. You learn from your heroes. You meet the past. You discover your power. Wait a minute. You move towards hope. So what I love about this book, aside from the obvious, which is the message, it's the kind of book that you can read for bunches of different ages. You could actually read it to your friends or your partner, and every page could be the basis of a discussion, which to me is the fun part of sitting and reading to your child, to your grandchild. Just very taken with this book, and it's called When You Take a Step. I think you have to get it for any kid in your life, and you might want to read it yourself and put yourself in a good mood. So I thought about this book, Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, and what made me think about it is there's this extraordinary Vermeer exhibit in Amsterdam, which apparently you can't get tickets for, and I often think about books that were huge bestsellers but nobody's talking about them anymore. So I had this book brought back into the store because it's still a great book. And if you can't get a ticket to the Vermeer exhibit, which you can't, and if you can, let me know, you can at least read The Girl with a Pearl Earring. This is a book that just came out. It's called The Absent Moon by Louise Schwartz, a memoir of a short childhood and a long depression. So Louise is a Brazilian world-renowned publisher who, unbeknownst to the community, has suffered severe depression and has been diagnosed as bipolar. This is a brave, tender, honest book about what this is like. So if you're not grappling with any issues like this, or you don't know someone that is, it's still a great read, because I just love the way he talked about the story and the issue of the generational transference of trauma is something that I connect to. Louise Schwartz's father is a Holocaust survivor, and he talks about the impact of that on him. But if you are suffering with this, or you have someone in your intimate circle of friends, it will bring a different level of understanding. And Luis's hope, I interviewed him for a podcast which will air in a bit, and his hope is that it will continue to make these topics liberated from any stigma. It's both tender and informative and honest, just very, very honest. So it's called The Absent Moon by Louise Schwartz. So if you want like a good old-fashioned phenomenal read, Rebecca Mackay's new book, I have some questions for you. She wrote The Great Believer, which so many different readers loved. She does what she always does well. This book is in the present and the past. A professor, a woman, goes back to her boarding school in New England to teach a class on podcasting. And she finds herself immersed in who she was then versus who she is now. But also there was a murder on campus back then. So if that sounds a little like Secret History, it is a little bit like that, but it's very contemporary in terms of the Me Too movement, about how we think about discussing issues, how our biases end up affecting even how we might think who a murderer was. And maybe the murderer that they arrested for this student's murder is not the right person. And Rebecca Mackay has created what, it's an overused cliche, but it is a propulsive read. You will start this and you will want to finish it. She's great with developing characters. It has an element of mystery, and she's just a beautiful writer. So you might want to read that. I don't know how many of you have watched Succession, which is about chicanery, meanness, corporations, greed, power, all those things. Well, that's fiction. This is not fiction. It's called Unscripted, The Epic Battle for a Media Empire and the Redstone Family Legacy by James Stewart and Rachel Abrams, well-known New York Times business journalists. So when I interviewed James, here's what I said, and I'll share that with you. This could be the next episode, next season of Succession, but I will tell you this, like every 10 pages, my jaw dropped. Because you cannot believe, you can't even believe that this can be true. So if you're not interested in the business world, it's just a stunning book on bad behavior. If you are interested in the business world and you were following this story contemporaneously, James and Rachel had access, because of all the lawsuits, to an extraordinary trove of information. Rarely has there been a business book written with the kind of access that they had. I love James. I don't know Rachel, so I don't not love her, but I just don't know her. James has again written a riveting book about behavior, corporations, and business. It's called Unscripted. If you want like a taste of what the book's about, you can listen to the podcast, but the link will be somewhere in there. If you really want every delicious detail, and there's a lot of delicious details, read the whole book. 2 other books I want to mention to you are not out yet, but one book is called American Ramble by Neil King. And this book sounds like such a simple thing. Neil King, 1 year out for the pandemic, he's a journalist, decided to walk from Washington to New York. And his goal was twofold. One is to sort of touch the beginning of our country. So part of the journey was going to historical places, some of which are well known, some of which were forgotten. And the other part of his goal was to understand who we were now. So he left time in this walk to ramble, meaning to serendipitously meet people. And then I came away as a reader thinking about, how do we spend our time? How do we appreciate what's right in front of us? I know this sounds like a cliche, but how do we have more in common than we have as differences? So I'm going to make this like simple little statement. Everybody should read American Ramble. I learned a lot about history. I felt more hopeful. I was fascinated with how he constructed this trip. Good for all ages. You could give this to a high school kid. You could give this to your father who's, 85 years old. Neil King has made a real contribution to both our history and our sense of humanity. I also interviewed him for a podcast, but that's not out yet. We'll let you know when it is. But I urge you to pre-order this book, get it for yourself, get it as a gift. Think ahead for Mother's Day or Father's Day. It's a great, I just realized it's a great graduation gift, even though it's March. But in case you don't get the message, I adored it. So one of the books, besides American Ramble, that I read on vacation a couple of weeks ago is Hang the Moon. It's by Jeanette Walls. So you know Jeanette Walls probably is the writer of the memoir Glass Castle, which was like a mega bestseller for ages. So this is fiction, and it's a blast. It's just a blast. It's set in Prohibition going forward, and at the center of it is an exquisite female bootlegger. It's just a great story. You just have so much fun. You'll love the character. You'll like all the characters around her. Jeanette Walls has again delivered just a highly readable, fun book. So that's it for today.